You've done the courses, you've read the books, you've set the budgets, yet something still isn't working. You keep hitting an invisible wall, like there's a force just out of reach pulling you back into the same cycle. Financial stress, under-earning, self-sabotage, even when you know better. It's not about laziness, it's not about intelligence, and it's definitely not about bad luck. What you're facing isn't a surface-level money problem. It's a psychological imprint, a script written in your unconscious mind long before you ever had a bank account. Most people don't see it because it doesn't look like a script. It looks like normal. It feels like reality. But what if that reality was programmed into you before you could even speak? This isn't about blaming your childhood. It's about decoding it. Because until you understand the emotional blueprint behind your financial behavior, you'll stay trapped, regardless of how hard you try to break out. So let's begin. The earliest years of your life weren't just a phase. They were a factory. And what they manufactured was your sense of self-worth, your beliefs, your expectations, your identity. By the time you were 7, your mind had already absorbed the rules of survival, not from words, but from environment. If, for example, you learned that money made adults angry, if asking for things brought tension or rejection, if comfort was a rare, unpredictable thing, you didn't just learn facts. You learned who you were allowed to be. You may have concluded, silently, that wanting too much is dangerous, that stability is for other people, that your needs are a burden. And so even now, as an adult with freedom and opportunity, your nervous system reacts to wealth like it's a threat. Not because it is, but because once it was. This is the core of financial stuckness, a distorted self-concept formed in childhood, operating in the background, overriding logic, discipline, and even desire. Let's call it what it is: psychological conditioning. At the center of that conditioning is the inner belief, I am not worthy. Not worthy of ease, not worthy of abundance, not worthy of being fully seen and supported. And the worst part is, this belief isn't obvious. It hides under things that sound noble: humility, modesty, simplicity. It sounds like, I just need enough to get by. I don't want to be greedy. I'm not good with money. But these are not neutral statements. They're echoes of early emotional imprinting, signals from a time when staying small felt safer than being visible. Here's the irony. Most of your adult financial strategies are not about building a life of freedom. They're about maintaining psychological safety. Safety defined by your childhood conditions. Safety that says, don't ask for too much. Don't shine too brightly. Don't want more than what was given. So what happens? You undercharge. You overgive. You accept underemployment. Not because it's rational, but because a deeper part of you believes that's what you deserve. And that belief is older than memory. You may feel frustration at your financial patterns, but beneath that frustration is grief. Grief for a child who was never taught that they were allowed to have enough. That child still lives in you. And until you speak to them directly, consciously, they will keep pulling your financial choices toward what feels familiar, even if that familiarity is pain. Here's the truth. The mind doesn't seek success. It seeks familiarity. And if struggle is familiar, you will recreate it again and again until you decide to confront the original script. That confrontation starts with one question. Who did I have to become to be accepted? Did I have to be quiet? Did I have to be responsible for others? Did I have to make myself small to avoid punishment, conflict, or rejection? Your financial identity today is a reflection of those roles. Not because you chose them, but because they were necessary. Necessary for love, necessary for safety, necessary for emotional survival. And so those roles became beliefs, and those beliefs became behaviors, and those behaviors became your financial reality. But it doesn't have to stay that way, because if it was programmed, it can be reprogrammed. But not through hustle, not through willpower, and definitely not through shame. It begins by making the unconscious conscious, by recognizing that your financial limits aren't personal failures, they're inherited scripts. And you are not the script. You are the one reading it, which means you can begin to write a new one.
You tell yourself you want more freedom, more income, more stability. And yet, when those things begin to show up, something inside you tightens. You hesitate. You deflect. You shrink. The opportunity is there. The door is open, but you don't walk through. And you don't understand why. This is where most people get stuck, because they confuse avoidance with laziness or fear of failure. But the truth runs much deeper. This isn't fear of failing, it's fear of being exposed. And beneath that, it's shame. Not guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, there is something wrong with me. And when shame sits at the foundation of your identity, abundance becomes unbearable. Not because you don't want it, but because on a deep unconscious level, you believe you don't deserve it. This is the hidden emotional blueprint that governs financial avoidance. It's not about poor choices, it's about protection, from being fully seen, from taking up space, from confronting the story you've carried since you were too young to defend yourself. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional or support was inconsistent, you learned to equate need with risk. You learned to associate receiving with exposure, as though to want something was to betray the role you had to play, the quiet one, the selfless one, the burden-free one. In that environment, asking for more, whether it was attention, money, or help, came with emotional consequences. And so you learned to self-abandon. You learned to preempt rejection by rejecting yourself first. You stopped asking. And now, as an adult, the pattern continues. You chronically underprice yourself. You avoid looking at your finances. You sabotage income flows. You procrastinate on big steps, not because you're disorganized, but because something in you is afraid of the emotional weight that visibility brings. This is not a time management issue. This is not a knowledge gap. This is unresolved shame. The reason it's so hard to break out of this is because shame doesn't speak in words. It speaks in sensation, in silence, in the things you avoid without knowing why. Shame tells you you're too much or not enough, sometimes both at once. And because it was planted so early, it doesn't feel like an emotion, it feels like identity. So when money starts coming in, when your work is recognized, When your capacity to receive expands, the nervous system flares up. Because it's not just about the money, it's about what that money represents. Validation, visibility, the threat of not being able to hide. And if you've spent your life emotionally surviving by staying hidden, then being seen, especially in your financial life, feels unsafe. It creates a paradox. You want success, but success feels like exposure, and exposure feels like danger. So your system does what it was trained to do. It protects you by shutting down, by keeping you humble, by keeping you stuck. Here's the truth. Shame is not just an emotion. It's a containment system. It's a way of keeping the psyche small enough to match the image you were given as a child, the image of what was acceptable. And because shame thrives in secrecy, it uses avoidance to stay alive. Avoidance of finances, avoidance of success, avoidance of your own needs. The unconscious logic goes like this. If I don't look too successful, I won't be judged. If I don't need too much, I won't be rejected. If I stay small, I'll stay safe. But this isn't safety. It's a psychological prison. To escape it, you have to confront the real enemy. Not your habits, not your discipline, but your inherited beliefs about worthiness. Because no strategy will override shame that hasn't been metabolized. And here's the catch. You can't think your way out of shame. You have to feel your way through it. You have to identify where the shame lives, in your voice, in your posture, in your money conversations, and name it. That act of naming is disruptive because shame depends on silence to survive. Once it's named, it loses power. So the next time you avoid checking your bank account, the next time you dismiss a client opportunity, or you discount your work before anyone asks, pause and ask yourself, what part of me still believes I don't deserve more? You will likely find that the part of you that's ashamed isn't the adult. It's the child, the one who had to survive by making themselves easy, invisible, and low maintenance. And that child isn't wrong. They were adaptive, but they don't get to run your financial life anymore. You don't owe your past identity your current future. You don't have to wear shame as proof that you're a good person. You don't have to under-earn to be worthy. Your financial freedom begins not with action, but with honesty. Honesty about the shame you've normalized. Honesty about the emotional logic behind your avoidance. And honesty about what you truly believe you deserve. Only then does transformation begin. Not from a place of pressure, but from a place of reclamation. Because your life doesn't shift when you get more money. It shifts when you stop believing you're not allowed to.
There's a voice inside you that sounds like reason. It tells you to wait, to be careful, to play it safe. It sounds rational, mature, even responsible. But what if that voice isn't actually yours? What if the authority you obey, the one that tells you how much to charge, how much to ask for, how much you're allowed to want, isn't your own judgment at all? This is the hidden architecture of financial self-sabotage. Internalized authority, a psychological mechanism where the voices of childhood caretakers become indistinguishable from your own. You obey them without realizing. You mistake obedience for humility. You confuse internalized fear with logic. This isn't conscious, it's automatic. If, as a child, you were raised in a system where compliance was survival, you didn't learn how to think independently. You learned how to interpret tone, how to detect danger, how to minimize conflict. You became hyper-aware of the moods, opinions, and judgments of others, especially of the people who held power. In that context, disapproval wasn't just uncomfortable, it was threatening. And so your psyche adapted. It took the loudest, most emotionally charged voices and internalized them. Over time, those voices stopped sounding like them. They became you. So now when you think about raising your rates, or taking a risk, or asking for support, you hear resistance. But that resistance isn't based on current reality. It's the echo of a system you were never allowed to question. It tells you that's too much. Don't be arrogant. You don't need that. Stop being difficult. And because it's coming from inside your own head, you assume it's your higher self. It's not. It's inherited conditioning. This is the tragedy of unconscious adulthood. Most people are still obeying rules they didn't choose, but they've forgotten the origin. So they obey blindly, and they call it self-discipline. But it's not discipline, it's submission. And nowhere is that submission more evident than in your relationship with money. You justify staying in underpaid roles. You hesitate to ask for what your work is worth. You tell yourself it's about stability. But the truth is, you're afraid of confrontation. Not external, internal. Because to change your financial life, you have to disobey the voice that tells you not to. You have to violate the unconscious rules that you don't get to want more, that your needs must be manageable, that your job is to avoid disappointing others even at the cost of yourself. But these aren't moral rules. They're emotional contracts. And most of them were signed before you knew how to read. The authority you carry inside you today is not just one person. It's a blend, a fusion of early power figures whose moods determined your safety. Their preferences became your constraints. Their expectations became your ceiling. Their silence became your guilt. So even now, as an adult, when you make choices that go beyond those constraints, you feel guilty. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've broken the emotional contract. And your nervous system reads that guilt as danger. So it stops you. It pulls you back. It tells you, don't rock the boat. But whose boat? And who told you that rocking it would sink your life? Here's the truth. Internalized authority is a form of psychological possession. You carry the voice of another as if it's your own. You mistake fear for conscience. You mistake control for structure. And worst of all, you call it being realistic. But reality is flexible. Conditioning isn't. And if you don't question the conditioning, you will mistake it for truth. So let's question it. Who told you that asking for what you're worth is selfish? Who told you that having more than others is wrong? Who told you that you had to justify your needs? More importantly, who benefits when you stay small?
Because every system of control requires internal compliance. And that compliance doesn't always come through force. It comes through programming. Programming that says, don't disappoint. Don't be too much. Be grateful for what you have. Other people have it worse. You should feel lucky. Each of these phrases repeated enough times becomes a barrier, not just to wealth, but to agency. Because you don't just inherit genetics, you inherit narratives. And unless you interrupt those narratives, you will live inside someone else's emotional economy. Here's what that means. You will censor your ambition to protect imaginary rules. You will dim your light to avoid phantom disapproval. You will structure your financial life around the comfort of people who no longer have power over you, but whose voices still live in your mind. So how do you break the pattern? First, you have to identify the voice. Name it. Is that your fear or your father's fear? Is that your hesitation or your mother's guilt? Is that your anxiety or the shame of a system you were born into? You must separate the I from the they. Because if you don't, you'll keep living in reaction to ghosts and calling it strategy. You don't need more discipline, you need discernment. The ability to recognize which thoughts are yours and which were assigned. Only then can you begin to move from control into clarity, from obedience into ownership. Your financial liberation doesn't begin with action. It begins with authority, reclaiming the right to define what is enough, what is fair, what is possible. Not according to a script you are handed, but one you consciously create.
You say you want financial security, but when it starts to arrive, in the form of savings, opportunity, or stability, something feels off. Not wrong, necessarily, just unfamiliar, uncomfortable, like you're wearing clothes that don't fit. And before long, you find yourself back where you started, scrambling, worrying, hustling again. This is the paradox most people never recognize. Abundance doesn't always feel safe. In fact, for many, scarcity is more comfortable, not because it's enjoyable, but because it's familiar. And the mind always defaults to what it knows. Here's what no one tells you. When you grow up in unpredictability, emotional, financial, or relational, your nervous system calibrates to that chaos. It adapts to instability. It organizes itself around lack. You don't just experience scarcity, you internalize it. You learn to anticipate it. You build an identity around managing it. And that identity, the one who survives, who makes it work, who holds everything together, becomes your psychological home. Now fast forward to adulthood. You're in a position to earn more, to rest, to relax. But instead of relief, you feel disoriented, as if something is missing because the familiar chaos is gone. That's when the sabotage begins. You overspend. You create unnecessary problems. You delay decisions. You unconsciously recreate the stress that your body has learned to associate with normal. Why? Because when scarcity is what kept you psychologically safe in childhood, abundance feels like a betrayal. Not a betrayal of logic, a betrayal of self. This is trauma repetition, the compulsive recreation of emotional states that match your earliest blueprint for connection and survival. It's not a conscious choice, it's a conditioned loop. Think about it. If as a child, your needs were too often unmet, if stability was never guaranteed, if love came with strings or disappeared without warning, then your system adapted by finding control in the uncontrollable. You got good at crisis management. You learned to live with not enough, and that not enough became your internal baseline. So when enough starts to show up, not just financially, but emotionally, it threatens that baseline. It feels foreign, untrustworthy, unsafe. And because your system doesn't trust what it can't predict, it unconsciously pulls you back to what it knows: scarcity. Here's the deeper truth. Your mind isn't loyal to what's best, it's loyal to what's familiar. If suffering kept you connected, you will unconsciously seek it. If self-denial made you lovable, you'll resist self-nourishment. If unpredictability was the norm, stability will feel boring, even threatening. So the question isn't, why can't I hold on to money? It's, what does scarcity protect me from? Feeling. For many, the answer is grief. Grief for all the years you had to survive without support. Grief for the younger version of you who normalized deprivation. Grief for how long you've lived without permission to feel safe. That's the irony of financial growth. It doesn't just require new habits, it requires mourning. You must mourn the identity that was built in opposition to stability, the one who fought, scraped, sacrificed, and made it work. You must mourn the protector who believed that chaos meant control. And you must let go of the belief that struggle is noble. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Some people don't fear failure, they fear peace. Because peace threatens the identity that was built in battle. If you've always equated financial struggle with integrity, or with effort, or with being real, then success will feel fake. It will feel disconnected from who you think you are. But that's not intuition, that's conditioning. And if you don't question that conditioning, you'll return to scarcity over and over, not because you have to, but because it's the only space where your nervous system knows who you are. So what do? You start by recognizing that abundance isn't just about money, it's about capacity. Your capacity to hold ease, to receive without guilt, to exist without a problem to solve. That's the work. To retrain your system to understand peace is not the enemy. Safety is not laziness. Stability is not weakness. But this requires more than affirmation. It requires exposure. You have to expose yourself slowly to sustained states of enoughness, to sit with surplus, to tolerate stillness, to experience moments where nothing is wrong and let that be okay. At first, your system will protest. It will search for danger. It will create urgency where none exists. That's normal. Because you're not just rewiring behavior, you're rewiring identity. And identity always resists extinction, even when it hurts you. So don't expect this to feel easy. Expect it to feel disorienting. But keep going. Because each time you allow yourself to hold abundance without sabotage, each time you resist the urge to create chaos, each time you choose safety over survival, You're proving to your nervous system that the past is not the present, and that you are no longer the child who had to live in lack. You are someone else now, someone who gets to define what's familiar, someone who gets to make peace feel like home. You pride yourself on being a hard worker. You're the one who gets it done. You show up, you push through, you make things happen, even when you're running on fumes. And people admire that. They call it commitment, discipline, drive. But beneath the surface, there's something else happening. Something you don't talk about. You're exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. Because no matter how much you do, it never feels like enough. The work never ends. The pressure never lifts. You live in a constant state of urgency. And the worst part is, you've gotten used to it. It's not even about money anymore. It's about proving something to yourself, to the world, to a ghost that never stops watching. This is not ambition, it's survival. And if we look deeper, we find a truth that most people are too afraid to admit. Overworking is not a strength, it's a shield. It's a psychological strategy, a mask that hides fear, shame, and emotional vulnerability. It creates the illusion of control in a world that once felt profoundly unsafe. Because when you were young, you learned one thing very clearly. Stillness was dangerous. Stillness meant exposure. Stillness meant feeling. Stillness meant someone might see how scared you really were. So you moved, you achieved, you produced, you became useful, reliable, impressive. But it wasn't empowerment. It was compensation. You weren't building confidence. You were managing anxiety. And now, as an adult, that same drive runs your life. You overcommit, you skip rest, you measure your worth by output. Not because you love the grind, but because slowing down feels like collapse. Because without the noise of activity, you're left with something far more threatening: silence. And in that silence, the truth starts to surface. The truth that you've tied your value to performance, that you believe your worth must be earned, that deep down you're terrified of being seen as lazy, weak, or undeserving. So you keep moving. You keep proving, and you keep draining yourself in the name of progress. But here's what's really happening. You're not chasing success. You're trying to outrun shame. And the irony is, it's that very pattern that keeps you financially stuck. Because when you live in a cycle of overwork, you don't leave space for strategy. You don't allow for creativity, reflection, or long-term thinking. You stay reactive, solving urgent problems instead of designing sustainable systems. More importantly, you teach your nervous system that money only comes through pressure, that rest is unsafe, that ease is undeserved. And as long as that association stays intact, you will unconsciously resist financial peace, because peace would invalidate the identity you've built. It would challenge the very foundation of your worth. And here lies the deeper conflict. You want abundance, but your nervous system only trusts pressure. You want to feel free, but your self-image is built around being needed, being busy, being essential.
So every time you get close to financial ease, you sabotage it by overcommitting, over-delivering, or simply creating more complexity than is necessary. Because ease threatens the identity you've relied on to feel safe. And here's the twist. Even when you earn more, you work harder. Even when you succeed, you raise the bar. Even when you hit your goals, you immediately create new ones. Because it was never about the outcome. It was about staying in motion. Motion keeps you from confronting the fear that's been sitting under the surface all along. The fear that if you stopped working, you'd have nothing left. No value, no purpose, no protection. But that fear is a lie. It's a leftover from a time when your worth was conditional, when being good meant being useful, when love was earned through service. You are no longer in that environment. But the belief remains, and unless you challenge it, you will recreate the conditions of your childhood through your work, through your income patterns, and through your inability to rest. So how do you break the pattern? You begin by asking a simple question. What am I afraid will happen if I stop proving myself? Sit with the answer. Don't rationalize it. Feel it. It might sound like, I'll be rejected. I'll be invisible. I'll lose control. I'll be exposed as a fraud. Whatever it is, let it rise. Because only when you name the fear can you start to unhook from it. Then, and this part is critical, you have to test it. You must consciously slow down. Take one thing off your plate, rest without guilt, say no without explanation, and then observe what happens. You'll feel the pull to compensate, to justify, to earn your pause. But that's the work, to sit in that tension without reaching for performance. Because that tension is where transformation happens. It's where you separate identity from activity. It's where you reclaim your value, not as a function of what you produce, but as an inherent part of who you are. Your worth is not transactional, your rest is not conditional, and your financial freedom does not require burnout. But until you believe that, deeply, somatically, you'll keep using work as a weapon against your own peace. And you'll call it ambition. But it's not ambition if it's fueled by fear. It's not success if it costs you yourself. Real abundance begins where performance ends, in the still, quiet space where you no longer have to prove anything to be worthy of everything.
So now you know. It was never just about budgets, never just about habits, never just about mindset. It was about the story behind all of it, the internal script you never consented to but have been following for decades. A script written in the quiet moments of childhood, moments where your needs were too much or not enough, where you learned to adapt, to shrink, to trade authenticity for approval. That script didn't just tell you how to behave, it told you who you were allowed to become. It gave you rules, not for money, but for worth, not for success, but for survival. And now you're standing here, adult on the outside, still negotiating with those rules. Still asking for permission, still looking over your shoulder, still trying to feel safe inside a system built to keep you small. You're not stuck because you're broken. You're stuck because you've been loyal. Loyal to an outdated identity. Loyal to emotional contracts written by people who didn't know how to meet your needs. Loyal to beliefs that once protected you, but now imprison you. But here's the truth that changes everything. You can rewrite the script. Not by pretending the past didn't happen, not by forcing toxic positivity over trauma, but by reclaiming authorship, one belief, one boundary, one breath at a time. That begins with awareness. Every time you catch yourself underpricing, every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you hesitate to expand, receive, or rest, you have a choice. You can follow the old narrative, the one that says you're only valuable when you suffer, that safety comes from control, that success makes you a target. Or you can pause, breathe, and ask, who wrote this rule, and do I still believe it? Because belief is a decision, and a decision can be changed. No one can do this work for you, but you are not alone in it. Millions are quietly waking up, not just to financial limitations, but to the deeper story those limitations reveal. A story about worth, visibility, power, and the right to exist fully resourced without shame. To finish this journey, you don't need another tactic. You need permission, not from the past, but from yourself. Permission to want, permission to rest, permission to earn without apology, permission to thrive without guilt, permission to define success on your own terms. And when the old fear rises, because it will, you meet it not with force, but with truth. I am no longer that child. I do not owe my struggle to anyone. I do not have to earn my right to live with ease. That's not arrogance. That's repair. Because the final step in breaking free is not just creating a new life. It's grieving the years you spent believing you didn't deserve one. So grieve, and then begin again. Not as a performer, not as a survivor, but as the author of your own internal economy. An economy built on clarity, on self-trust, on enoughness, not as a reward, but as a birthright. You spent long enough making yourself small for people who didn't know how to hold your fullness. It's time to stop asking for permission. You are not the script. You are the one holding the pen, and the page is still blank.